moral maze because I'm feeling particularly moral today. Actually, I've got a sore throat, but that doesn't mean I can't be moral. Anyway, more of that later. Tanya Granic, Campaign Life Coalition, hasn't been on the show in a while. It's great to have you here.
Thanks.
There's always such a lot to talk about because we're not really particularly moral, are we? Now, you're half Croatian.
I am.
And Croatia entered the European community, 24, 48 hours ago or
yes,
so?
just yesterday.
Which, I mean, may help the economy, but part of the problem is these countries with their wonderful traditions, they lose so much. And there's always a pressure to be just like Western Europe. But Western Europe, in moral terms, is falling apart. Judith Riesman's been on the show. She'll be back later in the month. A very radical sex education program being forced on Croatians. They don't want it. The polls show that 80-90% do not want this, but it's being forced on them by a government.
Yes, you have a leftist ex-commie government who's basically taking the reins and running with it. Then they're trying to shove this radical sex education down the throats of the students without the parental consent.
Yeah.
And thank goodness the courts had the smarts to say, you know what, hold off, let's suspend this program until we get some parental consultation. Like you said, the majority of parents do not want this, and it should not go through. Now the lefty government has a partner in the EU who will probably help them facilitate throwing this program back into the faces of the parents.
Yeah. So I think if people say, well, but the government was elected, as in France, people elect a government to deal with the economy. They think the economy is not going well, we want a better economy. And then the government comes in and says, oh, yes, we'd also like to teach your kids about oral sex, please. And whoa, hold on, this is Croatia. Was it 4.5 million people or so?
Right.
90% Catholic or something. We're serious Catholic. We don't want this. We really don't. And then Hollywood comes into play because Hollywood is so powerful and it tells people in the emerging Europe, oh, to be fashionable and progressive and trendy, you've got to believe in all this stuff. And so the pressures on young people in particular are immense.
And I think that point is definitely not lost on the thousands and thousands of Croatians who lost their lives in a war that ended less than 20 years ago. And they fought that war to keep the Croatian values, the identity, and the culture and traditions. So to have this government come in and just slap it around in their face and say, forget it, we're throwing this sex ed, we're going to ram it down your throats whether you like it or not, is really awful.
Yeah. It was very perverse, really, to watch just last week in Texas, a Democrat state senator behaving like a child, but being so proud of the fact that she'd managed to make it more likely that the unborn children will be killed, particularly the unborn children of minority families.
Yeah, it was quite awful to watch, and then have that unruly mob storm the chamber and shout it down. I mean, it seems that government now is being reduced to whomever shouts the loudest wins. Yeah. And this mob behavior is just awful. What's even worse is that Obama endorses this behavior by tweeting out to his 33 million plus followers that, oh, look what's going on in Texas, something magical is happening right now.
This was a bill to be put forward by the state, everyone elected democratically, and people knew what they stood for, to limit abortion. It wasn't to make abortion illegal, it was to limit abortion. And the vast majority of people actually would support this, as I think they would in Canada. But they said to stop the bill being put through by midnight, filibuster, and then when she ran out, just couldn't do it anymore, a mob effectively stormed the chamber and just shouted and screamed so that the speaker could not introduce the bill. Yeah,
we see this happening all over the world. You know what? It is. And it's disgusting to watch because I'm sure the framers of Confederation did not come together and say, this is what we want. We want mob rule in the chambers of the legislature or Senate. It's just awful.
Yeah, it is shocking, whatever your view. I mean, if pro-lifers ran in screaming and shouting to make sure that a bill couldn't even be discussed before midnight, you know that every newspaper in the land would say, this is terrible, this is terrible.
But this is a tactic the left continue to play. I mean, we saw with MP Stephen Woodworth where he was shouted down and kicked out of a university hall as an invited guest. The same thing happens. It's a tactic the left continue to employ because they just can't win, they can't get their point across, so let's just shout about it.
But, you see, Stephen is a very good fellow, but he shouldn't have gone. He shouldn't have walked off the platform. I've encountered these morons as well. You have to make a stand. You have to take a stand. And so you video the whole thing. And I always say to them, you've got a right to ask me difficult, abusive questions if you like, but if you try to silence me, this is all being filmed. It'll be on national TV tomorrow. You've got to push the authorities at these universities into acting with a bit of backbone. Otherwise, if they keep getting away with it. Instagram, which I have to say, I'm on Twitter. I don't use Facebook much anymore. Instagram is beyond me at this stage. Slut shaming. Of what do we speak?
This is slut shaming is basically a bunch of the girls, in this case in Gothenburg, Sweden. A couple girls, they're teenagers, 15, 16, got together, posted stacks of photos of women they viewed led promiscuous lifestyles.
Yeah.
Over 200. They have something over like 6,200 followers. The students from other schools rioted, basically started overturning cars and freaking out about this Instagram account and saying this is wrong, this is cyberbullying. What I see, this is a lose-lose situation. Obviously, it's wrong for these girls to go and humiliate people, especially on a public forum like the internet, and cyber bully people.
Yeah.
But it also speaks to the culture. Like, it's a lose-lose situation because who are these people? Why are there so many masses of promiscuous young people who feel that this is the way they must behave in order to be a normal member of society?
Well, in Sweden, in much of Scandinavia, marriage has been so devalued.
That's it.
And the state is so all-powerful, the idea of personal responsibility has evaporated to a large extent.
It is, and I think this is yet another example. Like, bad on the students for posting this, but bad on the students for feeling that the other students for being promiscuous. I don't think that's a good path to go on, and I think that's a result of, yet again, the radical sexual education and pushing it down the students' throats in schools.
Well, I mean, Scandinavia, I mean, we're generalizing here because of, 4 or 5 countries we're talking about, but certainly Sweden and parts of Denmark as well, but Sweden in particular, it's the perfect storm. You have a state saying the family is redundant, we will take over. It's materially comfortable and pleasant. You now have a very radical Islamic community, and everything it demands is being given. You have in Malmo, the third city after Gothenburg, the Jews of the city just hemorrhaging because they're so frightened of living there.
Right.
Marriage has been destroyed. I don't think Scandinavia has a future, particularly Sweden. I don't think Sweden will exist as we know it within 15 years. However, on a happier note, teacher in the dock over his obscene text to teenage father who hanged himself?
Yeah, it's...
What?
It's quite a nasty situation. Basically, this teacher, I guess, was trolling on some website looking for some encounters. The student was embarrassed. His the mother of his son, who's also a teenager, found out, and he was so humiliated he hung himself. Oh. On the same vein, though, just last week, there were 2 Ontario teachers who yet again have been charged with sexual offenses. And it seems this is a trend that we're continuing to go on.
Hold on, a teacher in the dock because he had obscene text to teenage father who hanged him. So I don't quite understand. So this was a teacher who was trolling, looking for sex.
Yeah, he's just doing it on his own spare time,
and then he came across...
He came across a young man.
Right.
At that point, he may have not known his age, but he came across this young man, and basically, I can't even say it, it's so vulgar, but was sending lewd and vulgar text messages.
To this young man?
To this young man. And he became so humiliated that he basically hung himself out of shame.
The young man?
That's correct. Yeah, it's really awful.
Why didn't you just call the cops and get this guy arrested?
I think he was just embarrassed about the whole circumstances being exposed, especially to the mother of his child, a fellow girlfriend who's a teenager. But again, you have here teachers in the classroom basically teaching sexual education to their students, then turning around and taking them as their victims.
Well, not many teachers do that.
Not many, but it's happening a lot. And I do think that the over-sexualization in the classroom is a big problem.
Well, that is.
Because we have a very careful boundary here. We have teachers students who look up to teachers as role models, but how can they continue to do so for...
We want the old days when the gym teacher would come in and say, if you have sex outside of marriage, you will die. End of story. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.